Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am Zack Reed. I am joined by JMic at JMic Check, and this is continuing the 2024 Dynasty Dummies rookie Hootenanny. If you're all caught up, you're ready for the catch-all show. We've done 2 sets of 6 wide receivers. We've done 2 sets of 6 running backs. We've done 4 quarterbacks, 4 tight ends, and we're into the catch-all, the class participation portion of the program, where you tell us who we've missed, you tell us who you would like us to get eyes on, and we try to deliver if we've got enough time. We've got this week and 3 more weeks, JMic tells me, before we are up against the hard deck, as it were, and you can't fly below the hard deck because Jester is right on your tail. So we're going to give you as much as we can in the time that we've got for these catch-all shows. Today, we're going to go through 6 more wide receivers. I am here for it. I'm excited about it. I'm happy to see your face, JMic. How are you doing this evening?
Treating these last 4 weeks of the Hootenanny like Connect 4. Go for it. Connect 4 weeks worth of 20 players.
Yeah.
Trying to fit 50 in. I'm excited. I'm good. I'm grateful to be with you. The last show in March. And again, after today, we've got 3 more weeks of the Hootenanny. And we have a lot of players that have been asked about, a lot of guys who are intriguing, that some of which we still need to watch, some of which we've already watched. But there's a lot to be done in these next several weeks. And so we're going to do our absolute best to ensure that we not only get to and do our due diligence on the folks that you all have asked about, but we are also going to make sure to fit in quality time with each of these folks to ensure that we are giving you our absolute best as our listeners and folks who rock with us. And again, thank you for doing so over these last several weeks. As Zack outlined, it has been a journey. It has gone quickly, and there's still more to go. But before you know it, we're in draft month and we're on our way. So Zack, before we get into the next 6 players today, and I'll set the stage here in a little bit for those, what's on your mind, or what musings do you have to be able to talk through getting us started?
So I got just a little bit of housekeeping, nothing real pressing, but I wanted to remind people as Scott Fishbowl news comes out and live drafts start getting rolling, fantasycares.org/dynasty dummies. If you enjoy our rookie work at all, a donation to Fantasy Cares at fantasycares.org/dynasty dummies will get you my film notes. Right now, I think we're up to almost 50 players. By the time we're done, it's going to be more than that. So you're getting your money's worth, whatever you're donating. And even if you don't want my rookie film notes, I won't take that personally, but do donate anyway to fantasycares.org, because it's a great organization with a bunch of great charities associated with it. It's one of the best parts about the fantasy football community. It's spearheaded by Scott Fish, but he's really galvanized the entire community behind charitable giving, behind the Scott Fish Bowl, behind fantasycares.org. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me to say, hey, I'll donate my film notes. Bob Gilchrist has done a really great job putting them together, making them look pretty. And so if you do donate, if you do go to fantasycares.org/dynasty dummies and donate, all of that money goes to Fantasy Cares. All of that money goes to charity, whether it's going to Toys for Tots or JDRF or some of the other charitable foundations that Fantasy Cares gives to. So it's worth doing. It's worth donating, even if you don't care about my film notes. There are other pieces to that. And you're going to see Scott Fishbowl come up. Follow Fantasy Cares org on Twitter. Check them out on YouTube. You can watch this show, and we're on the Fantasy Cares YouTube feed right now. So it's worth doing. It's worthwhile. It may be the most worthwhile thing you can do in the fantasy football space.
And it's been incredible to watch the growth of Fantasy Cares over these last several years, but even just the last few, how exponentially I feel like it's really boomed. And to see the generosity, to see the lives touched, whether it be the folks who are actually contributing in various ways, the folks shopping for Toys for Tots, whether it be the kids who are actually going to be the recipients. It's a really cool piece of the puzzle that we get to influence those around us in such a positive manner. So grateful to be in cahoots and in support of Fantasy Cares, and allowing obviously Zack to have his notes be seen exclusively there, as well as just us partnering together to bring hopefully dope content and a lot of positivity to go forward. So with that, Zack, let's transition into these 6 wide receivers that we will talk through this evening. We're staying on the West Coast for a lot of it, and then we'll head down to the SEC to finish up. But we've got 6 players. We've got the Jalen's out of Washington. We're looking at Ja'Lynn Polk. We're looking at Jalen McMillan. We're going to go see about Jared's boy out west. Oh, Jared Rice's son. Brenden Rice out for USC, USC Part 1, which is Southern California. We've got Jacob Cowing, the one little guy in the midst of these 6'1 plus players today, out from Arizona. We've got Xavier Legette that will be venturing out to the other coast to get the other USC. Big shout out to Mox. And lastly, Ricky Pearsall, Pretty Ricky, out of Florida. Zack, I'm excited to be able to talk through these players, not necessarily because these are guys that have rocketed up boards or are getting a lot of eyes, but these are players that obviously put together quality college careers, and lots of folks are excited for different reasons for different players. We're looking at majority seniors here, aside from our first entry, which is one Ja'Lynn Polk, measuring in at the combine 6'1", 203, the one underclassman of the group today. And again, one of the 3 wide receivers that Michael Penix had to play with last year that will likely be playing in the NFL this upcoming season. We're looking at a player who started his career at Texas Tech, got 10 games played there, and then found himself in Washington for the last 3 seasons. And in this final season, where the Huskies were really doing work toward obviously being the runner-up in college football playoff, 69 catches, 1,159 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Ja'Lynn Polk, ultra productive, someone obviously some see as the second banana to Rome Odunze, some see as the third banana, but everyone sees him as a quality pro. Zack, what are you seeing of the prospects regarding Ja'Lynn Polk?
It might not sound impressive that Ja'Lynn Polk has the distinction of putting up the second most yards, second most receptions, and third most touchdowns all time at his high school, until you hear that he attended Lufkin High in Texas, the alma mater of Kiki Kuti and Dez Bryant. During the 2023 season, Polk had a nice year as the complement to Odunze, hauling in 69 receptions, 1,159 yards, and 9 touchdowns. At 6'1", 203 pounds, Polk has the size and the strength to make plays in traffic and through contact. I think he does a really good job getting downfield. He often uses double moves to gain leverage deep. And at the catch point, Polk is adept at separating the defender from the ball with his body. So he likes to get in between the defender with his body and make those high point plays. He'll go up and get it, and he'll hands catch. Polk can also separate in route very well, especially at the stem, where he specializes in sudden changes of direction. When he's working against zones, Polk routinely manages to attack the sideline gaps at the second level, something you don't always see with every player. And it's a little bit of you have to have a knack to find those holes. So pretty impressive on the part of Ja'Lynn Polk.
Yeah, and someone that I think plays with a good deal of tempo. There is a lot of variation in his movement, and I feel like consistently game after game, what you find is a player who, while not always adept at making the spectacular catches, does a good job of making plays consistently wherever he's gotten the ball, and even especially against the sideline. I like some of the work that he's able to do. And again, I don't think that it's spectacular, but I think that that kind of reliability can get him on a team and get him in position to be someone's number 3 and really put forth a quality career. And I feel like so much of his movements, because he's got this thing where as he's releasing, his arms kind of come out, and I'm not saying he plays like this player, but it just reminds me of the way that sometimes when Stephon Diggs he's releasing, he's got his arms that kind of come out like he's almost like a basketball player, like he's going to be doing a crossover. And while I don't think Ja'Lynn Polk has that special suddenness that Diggs does, I do think that his awkwardness kind of allows him at times to really put people to sleep, because you see him jump on players in close cushion and even create separation vertically that I don't think people were always ready for, but he was able to do that with some success, and other times not so much. But I think there's a lot of positive pieces to Ja'Lynn Polk's game in terms of what he can bring to an offense, doing a lot of different things. Zach, let's talk about drawbacks. Obviously, this is the catch-all, so we're not looking at top studs here. But Ja'Lynn Polk, what do you got?
Well, the common thread weaving itself through Ja'Lynn Polk's flaws ties back to a lack of top-end speed and quickness. Although he was used in a fair amount of screens, I think his ability to break them for splash plays is limited. And Polk struggles to separate on intermediate routes versus man coverage. And I think he also gets tackled by the initial defender an awful lot more than you'd like to see. You kind of are left wanting more yards after catch. And I think that's going to be kind of a theme with these two players from Washington. And his drops tend to come in clusters. And I think that stems back from a lack of concentration rather than technique. Like, I think he does a real good job getting his hands out, but I think sometimes he'll make one mistake and then compound it by getting frustrated and making more. While Ja'Lynn Polk is a talented receiver, it's difficult for me to imagine that he comes into the NFL as more than a second piece of an offense. And that probably puts him out of the range of useful fantasy producers, at least for the foreseeable future.
I think as I continue to watch Polk, one of the pieces that I just had questions with is how he can play a little bit stronger at the catch point, but in the actual route, I think that he's able to be rerouted far too often. And I know that there were some certain times where, because of him being rerouted the way that he was, when Penix was letting the ball go, it was like just outside of his reach. And I was like, all right, yeah, if you weren't getting bullied in this spot, I think that you'd be in a position to really be able to make a play there. I do also think that when we're looking at Ja'Lynn Polk, his lack of creativity with ball in hand specifically is one of those things where if you're not going to have kind of top end speed, and you're not going to have top end quickness or things that really, really differentiate you with ball in hand, what does it look like for you to be able to just create opportunities at the next level? And it has to be with your route running and having trustworthy hands, which I don't know that his ability to consistently get open, specifically deep. We see flashes of it. We see him be able to separate in flashes, specifically vertically. But I don't know that it opens a pathway for him to really shine as a top flight option in an offense with the lack of versatility in that sense. So Ja'Lynn Polk I think he's a fine player, and I don't really see the fantasy goodness to come. If that's fair to say. Not again, I could very well be proven wrong. I just when I watch him, I'm just left wanting a lot more. Speaking of wanting more, Jaylen McMillan, 6'2", 197 pounds. And when we're looking at Jaylen McMillan, again, we are staying right here with the Washington Huskies. Now, Jaylen McMillan is someone who not only went to the combine, ran a 4.47. People were really excited about, but obviously throughout last year and this year, many folks somewhat argued, hey, is he really the guy coming into this season? Was he the guy ahead of the likes of Rome Odunze? Now, as the season played out, Rome kind of was the guy, pretty clutch in many situations, but Jalen McMillan, even through injury, was able to provide some positive pieces to this past season. If we look at 2022, 79 catches, 1,098 yards, 9 scores. Very positive for him there. This past season, in 11 games played, major step back from a production standpoint. 45 catches, 559 yards, 5 touchdowns. Jalen McMillan, perhaps the enigma of this group of wide receivers that we'll be talking about today, Zach. Let's talk McMillan. What do you got?
Man, production can lie. In 2022, Jalen McMillan led the Washington Huskies in receptions and touchdowns. In 2023, McMillan battled that knee injury that you mentioned, but still put up the 559 yards, the 5 touchdowns. And I know he played 11 games. He only saw targets in 7. So he had 7 games, put up 560 yards, including 4 individual games over 95 yards through the air. In spite of all this, Jalen McMillan is an afterthought when talking about the 2024 class, brought up well behind teammates Rome Odunze and Ja'Lynn Polk. Over the past decade, NFL defenses has shifted away from big, punishing secondaries towards smaller, faster units that can cover the field in zone defenses. Jalen McMillan's game is designed to exploit that. He finds open spaces within zones and creates throwing lanes for his quarterback exceptionally well. He's a very consistent hands catcher. He receives the ball away from his body, makes sure that he is cushioning it and defending the ball at the catch point from the corner. In route, McMillan has an incredibly smooth gait. He seems to glide to open space. And against man coverage, he relies on slow playing defenders, setting them up with double moves and speed changes to get open deep.
Yeah, and I think that level of smoothness paired with his ability to change speed to leverage that tempo, and I feel like we're saying that a lot about the Washington players. But what he's able to do in route is, I think, what's most impressive about McMillan. I really enjoy the way that he is able to, I feel like, I don't know if it's more consistent than others, but I think that he leverages fakes and leverage of the defender really, really well. And I think that affords him the ability to really manipulate in all directions, whether it be vertically up the field or even going across the field. While sometimes I think that he lacks the explosion as a player coming out of the slot, that smoothness is different paced. And especially if it's in the right offense, which obviously it definitely was in Washington, but when you're paired with so many varying skills across the field, I think that it provides really nice opportunity for him, which we saw over and over again to just be a quarterback's best friend. That's it. A lot of positives there, but I think that there's just probably an equal amount of areas of opportunity for Jalen McMillan.
Yeah, I was so excited about digging into his film, but even as smooth as Jalen McMillan is, he struggles to find consistent separation versus cover corners. He's not sudden in route, and he's often unable to get away from man-to-man defenders. And because he has trouble finding that suddenness to separate, defenders can get their hands on him, can force McMillan off route, or into simply giving up on plays. And you saw that more than you would like, where he gets bodied up and all of a sudden stops, and Penix is throwing the ball, and the ball's kind of out in space, and McMillan is not anywhere near it. When McMillan drops passes, they also tend to come in clusters with negative plays following each other in succession. It's basically waves while his frustration mounts, and you can see him visibly get upset. and kind of go into himself and try to do too much. While Washington ran several screen plays a game for McMillan, he's not sudden with the ball either. There were many instances of him leaving yards on the field after the catch because of his inability to escape defenders in short areas, which is funny because he transitions to runner really quick, but he doesn't run very quick. As part of one of the most talented receiving corps in all of football, Jalen McMillan's talent kind of got lost in the shuffle. While he probably doesn't rise to a fantasy relevant level in the NFL, he could be a solid second or third option for a team, especially if they need a zone breaking specialist who can occasionally win downfield.
And Zach, I love the way that you put that. And again, when we talk through having the ball in your hand, which is where our fantasy points are, our bread is buttered, opportunities to have the ball in hand, to be able to transition quickly to a runner, but then to not really be able to maximize those opportunities. I think so much of that is his lack of being able to see the field and to see kind of what's going on and anticipate. Similar to Polk, I don't find him to be the most creative with the ball in the hand. And in many of those instances, it's not something that you're excited about. And I think so much about just in my scouting process. And again, these players not being the same, but I remember in the scouting process, another player that would get screens all of the time, but did very little with them in so many occasions, which was Jahan Dotson. I remember we would watch so much Jahan Dotson, and Penn State would run so many things for him. And there was so many opportunities for much more to be gained. And I really was started like, man, this has the same vibes, and I don't love that. I don't love that. But yeah, I think you outlined it really well. I think I have a lot of the same things that you've already talked through. But that run after catch piece and that quick transition to run, but not doing with it, that's nope. We'll move on to USC, and we will talk again through Jerry Rice's son, Brenden Rice, who acquitted himself just fine out there out west for the likes of Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams for the USC Trojans. Brenden Rice, 6'2", 208, went to the combine, ran a 4.5. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know you had that in you. And while not being the most explosive of athletes, again, acquits himself quite well when we think through his career at USC. Never really the guy that you were always excited about in this USC offense, whether it been Jordan Addison or this past season, Zach Branch, players who I think people were really excited about in that offense, and even the likes of Taj Washington, which I don't even know that we're going to be talking Taj Washington in the midst of the catch-alls, but I never really a guy that really stood above his peers in a major way. However, the senior season, 12 games played, 45 catches, 791 yards. That's good for 17.6 yards per catch and 12 touchdowns. That dog will hunt, Zach. Let's talk Brenden Rice.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So often this phrase gets tossed out in comparisons, traits passed down from father to son, similarities in mannerisms or talent, maybe a sense of humor. But sometimes the tree is so big, so much larger than life, that it casts a shadow virtually impossible to grow in. When your dad is the single greatest receiver in the history of the game, you might have to get out all the way to Southern California to find enough sun to grow. Brenden Rice is not the most ballyhooed son of a Hall of Fame receiver in the 2024 class, but he's had his share of the spotlight playing with Caleb Williams at USC. At 6'2", 208 pounds, it's no surprise that one of Rice's major calling cards is his physicality. He's great at making plays in traffic, whether fearlessly going across the middle and winning with strength at the catch point or high pointing downfield. Once he has the ball, Rice becomes a running back, utilizing vision, power, and contact balance to add yards after the catch. Maybe the most impressive is his ability to play on the boundaries. Rice is great at getting 2 feet down on plays on the sideline. Again, this is not something you have to do in college football, but you love to see guys working at it because they are already geared into playing at the next level. He gets those 2 feet down on the sideline, and he's excellent at working the timing of back shoulder throws, which are NFL throws.
Yeah, the physicality, I think, as you highlighted really well, Zach, is a place that Brenden Rice can show well. I do also like, just in the midst of his ability, or when he's working to release from the line of scrimmage, whether it be against press or zone, or even backed off corners who are backed off in man, he does leverage various releases. And in doing so, I think that he does a decent job of, within his actual route, things not consistently looking the same. And I think that allows him, especially in the areas and times when he would win vertically, again with the 4.5 speed that I think shows up at times on tape. I think that it allowed him to be able to do more with less, because I think that from a technical aspect, I think that he sees a lot of the things that he would want to do. I don't know that his body always allowed him to be able to do that in terms of having the quick enough feet to win in that sense, because I was really excited about some of the things that I was seeing early on when I watched him. And then I got to the Colorado game and watched him be draped over by the likes of Travis Hunter. I forgot the other guy that's across from Travis, the other corner, but everything underneath an intermediate, like they were on him and had him locked up pretty well in that sense. And so then I started getting really nervous about what I thought I was seeing. But what were you seeing in Brenden Rice's game that you were not in love with, Jack?
Yeah, there are a myriad of ways to win as a wide receiver at the NFL level, but currently that quick separation early in route is probably the easiest way, especially for fantasy. You're drawing targets, you're drawing volume. Brenden Rice does not do that. He is neither particularly quick and nor particularly fast, and that directly contributes to him struggling to separate versus press coverage off the line of scrimmage, and also against man coverage in route. And that's basically what you're talking about. Rice's lack of in-route speed also limits his ability to stretch the field vertically and consistently add chunk plays. For as physical as Rice can be over the middle, his lack of elite athleticism puts him at a disadvantage in jump ball and high point situations. So, like, you'll see him occasionally box out, but I don't think he consistently wins going up over a corner deep or a safety. Brenden Rice had some interesting traits and certainly some interesting genetics helping him make his bid for NFL success. For fantasy purposes, and probably for the NFL as well, I don't think that it's going to be quite enough. Rice feels unlikely on a depth chart high enough to garner usable production for us playing fantasy.
Yes, and I've neglected to mention, he spent the first 2 years of his collegiate career at Colorado, and the last 2 seasons, obviously, with USC. And I guess what I find to be interesting is, now that him being a senior and seeing what we've seen from him, I'm curious what's left in his growth in terms of like what is left to be accomplished from an improvement standpoint. When your dad's Jerry Rice and you've got the likes of playing at USC and having a lot of the advantages offensively, schematically, things of that nature, and I don't know that he ever really put his stamp physically on games. There would be plays here and there, but generally speaking, I don't know that he has the separation that allows you to really trust him in that aspect, nor do I think that he wins enough vertically with vertical fight or even getting deep that really puts him in position to separate or differentiate from a list of wide receivers that we've watched that are some of them do a lot of things well and do many things better than him, even though he's kind of steady Eddie in some of the areas. I think that's enough about Brenden Rice. Probably a little too long. No disrespect. Because he's fine player. Last player out west that we'll get to at the halfway point here. One Mr. Jacob Cowing. The diminutive Jacob Cowing, 5'8", 168, senior out of Arizona. And when we think about Jacob Cowing, I think that he's someone that really busted on the scene for majority of specifically fantasy folks at the Senior Bowl. He was someone that in practice, I think that people were like, oh, who's this guy? What's going on with him? And I think for a lot of our Devi brethren, he's probably been someone that they've known about for a while because of his production in college. He started his collegiate career at UTEP and spent 3 seasons there, 2019 through 2021. In his final season at UTEP, 69 catches, 1,354 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And you're like, whoa, doggy, we might have something here. He transfers to Arizona, gets in the Jed Fish offense, and is essentially the slot king, or as I've dubbed him, the speed out king. I don't know that anybody in the class runs speed out better than Jacob Cowing, but in the last 2 seasons, we're looking at a player that's got 175 catches and over 1,800 yards. And when we think about touchdowns, 20 touchdowns in his last 2 seasons, just ultra productive. And again, someone that they're getting the ball to at all levels. Zach, let's talk a little bit of Jacob Cowing.
Homophones are fun. You could hear incredible yak and immediately picture the most spectacular specimen of long-haired, short-legged ox-like mammal. Or maybe your mind jumps to Jacob Cowing dicing up defenses after making a grab on a slant. Cowing is not an imposing figure at 5'8", 168 pounds, but some players are more than the sum of their parts. Cowing drives most of his separation with quickness. He is very sharp in and out of his breaks, creating space and leaving no doubt in his quarterback's mind whether or not he is open. At the catch point, Cowing is very in tune with his, and he will set up defenders even before he has made a play on the ball. And Cowing's transition from the catch point to being a runner is borderline incredible. I think he may be the quickest player in the class from the catch to that ability to add on extra yards.
His ability, we say quick like a hiccup, his ability to be quick at all levels, not particularly at the stem, not just at the release, not simply when he's caught a screen. His quickness is his trump card. And in a class where a lot of players are pretty good or do some things a lot of well, it's his quickness that allows him the ability to do all of the things that he does. And once the ball's in his hand, while he's not running through over and around every single person, I do think that his ability to win early and win often, whether it be whatever the coverage is, I think that that's something that you can be excited about when it comes to the next level. Now, again, 5'8", 168. We see some of the deficiencies or many of the deficiencies, but I do think that his ability to win quick, win early, win often is something that can be exciting for any offense that he's plugged into, to be put in the slot and to do positive things in that regard. I was really, really taken aback. I wasn't ready for how quick he was and how often he would win sooner rather than later. That's it. Let's talk some more Jacob Cowing in reference to areas of his game that aren't anywhere close to what we see of others players.
So I think as adept as Cowing is at attacking man coverages from the slot, he does have some struggles against zones. He will drift and take himself into the vicinity of a defender before he sits, which kind of seals a cap on his ceiling On several occasions, Cowing misread cushions versus man coverage, continuing to push upfield when he was already open, and all he had to do was, come back to the quarterback. And partially due to his lack of size, partially due to complete lack of interest, Cowing doesn't block at all, at all. And so that you're not getting that piece from him, although you're not necessarily expecting it from a guy of his size. Very seldom will Cowing's position vary. He ran 70% of his snaps from the slot in 2023 for Arizona. I think most likely he continues to be a slot receiver at the next level. On the whole, the most glaring hole in Jacob Cowing's game may not be his lack of size, but that lack of versatility. The slot snaps probably lessen the impact, but the lesson is that an inability to attack zones at the next level will severely cap Cowing's fantasy point potential. And that's my fear is, man, he's so good against man coverage and tends to drift against zone. And when you're that size, you got to be in the right spot.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes the work that they would do in terms of getting him the ball on the edge, when I think of Arizona's offense, I think part of it is they had a smaller quarterback as well, but also him being small himself and not finding those holes, not availing himself in that regard, does not do a short quarterback favors, does not do himself favors, and does not do the offense favors, which is why I think that so often we see him working in many of the areas aside from over the middle from a standpoint of where he's actually getting the ball and doing the most of his work. Jacob Cowing, I think, is a player that I'm intrigued by. My only real question becomes, when we think through the fantasy prospects, is a team going to trust a 5'8", 168-pound player to be a even somewhat consistent part of their offense if he's playing exclusively from the slot and does not do a good job of winning consistently when it comes to over the middle, specifically in zones? And that's where I think that many of his deficiencies in that regard are just not something that have me very hopeful, even though I think he's a really good player. Like, I think he's a good player. I think it's a lot to overcome. We've done a lot of work out west, Zach. It's time for us to lose 3 hours. Go east, young man. We're going now to talk a little bit of Xavier Legette. Hey, primary example of better late than never. 6'1", 221 pounds, out of South Carolina, and the first several seasons of Legette's career, and by several, I mean first 4 seasons, 2019 to 2022, there was not much production to be had at all. However, in this past season, in 2023, 71 catches, 1,255 yards, 7 touchdowns. Like, okay, that's something I feel like we can get with. Moreover, number 3 in the SEC in receptions. And again, I think what might be his calling card, 17.7 yards per catch, number 5 in the SEC. We're looking at a guy that I think folks may have thought was a little bit taller, even though he is a baller. Who knows if he has a girl who looks good? He might call her. 4.3, 940 at the combine, and a 40-inch vertical. Shows off some really special burst. Zack, Legette, go.
Jekyll was the doctor, and that always sounded wrong to me. Jekyll has kind of a dark underlying edge to it, while Edward Hyde sounds like he might be the owner of a crumpet bakery. Xavier Legette's career has been an odd combination of both Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. During his first 4 seasons at South Carolina, Legette managed a meager 42 catches, 423 yards, and 5 scores. But in his 5th year in Columbia, Legette was a monster, racking up to 71 catches for 1,255 yards and 7 touchdowns. Legette's success seems straightforward. He's incredibly versatile and can be deployed as a runner and on screens, as well as being able to attack intermediate and deeper areas of the field. At 6'1", 221 pounds, Legette has the strength and hands to make plays in traffic and through contact. And once he has the ball in his hands, Legette is a very dynamic runner. He even has enough speed that he has the ability to run past the entire defense at times.
That explosion, I think, is most seen when he's given, I think, probably the route that is the most impressive for him time and again, deep overs. Deep overs, he is beating zone, he is beating man, he is beating bracket coverage. And I think that when he's really able to open it up, we see a lot of really fun things from Xavier Legette. And I think the other piece that we often see that's really fun from him, I don't know that it's as consistent as one might hope, but because of that athleticism, his ability to do some really just freakish stuff against the sideline in terms of circus catch stuff, going up and get it, like it's really fun. And I think it's kind of like you can put some of those plays that he has against that of Keon Coleman, and people be like, whoa, like this is okay. And I think that's why probably people thought he was so much bigger than he was, because some of that stuff that he does is just, it's freaky. Again, a guy who's getting the ball a ton on screens and getting the ball in his hands quickly, which you love to be able to see. Manufactured touches are not bad touches. I would have loved to have seen him do more from a creativity standpoint, but you talk about somebody who's really strong with the ball in their hand. I think that he does a good job of making defenders pay. And I don't know if it's necessarily maximizing, but it's not the first person that's taking him down consistently, which again is something that I like to see from a player on film. Zack, let's talk Xavier Legette as it pertains to, again, a guy who it took him 5 years to heat up. This was not just a slow cooker. This was a process for us.
Yeah, there is that seedy underbelly to Xavier Legette's game, although it's not necessarily his fault. South Carolina's persistent use of half-field reads means that Legette spent much of his time on offense simply not running routes. And this lack of repetition, along with his very limited early career usage, contribute a little bit to Legette's shortcomings as a route runner. This is especially noticeable against man coverage, where he has trouble creating and maintaining that early separation, that off the line of scrimmage, and, short and intermediate. The athleticism and post-catch ability of Xavier Legette is a tantalizing combination that leaves so much for the Dynasty community to dream on. I think there will be many sightings of Debo-esque traits while gazing at Legette's profile, but there's also an awful lot of Laviska Shenault lurking beneath the surface.
Ooh, doggy. And I think the flashes of his ability to, oftentimes, if we see him just kind of line up wide and just run any given route, you see him threaten often with the speed and even be able to work and come back downfield, specifically on comebacks. And I feel like that's one of those things where he's able to do a lot in terms of winning. But when it came to the one-on-one deep posts, deep anything deeper down the field, I think it felt like he lacked the savvy to consistently find technique, find the space to allow him to win in those instances. He doesn't lack the speed. He doesn't lack the quickness. I do think that he lacks refinement, and that's, again, something that makes you a little bit worried when you think about the fact that, again, it took you 5 years to heat up, and the majority of the time you're not running routes. you're not getting those consistent reps to be able to really refine what you do. But again, I think it's the explosiveness that could be a lot of fun for an offense to be able to play with. And I think that's one of the things that really makes Xavier Legette an intriguing prospect. And I think one that has a lot of people gravitating to what could be versus what he consistently showed game in and game out. Last, and on my list, certainly not least, pretty Ricky Pearsall out of Florida with a brief cup of coffee, Arizona State, 6'1", 189. And when we look at the life and times of Ricky Pearsall, 3 years at Arizona State, the last of which was in 2021, where he gave you 48 catches for 580 yards, 4 touchdowns, transfers down to Florida. Spends the last 2 seasons in 2022 and 2023, obviously playing with the likes of Anthony Richardson, and in this past season with Graham Mertz, and just not very fun offense to watch down in Gainesville. Regardless, he gave you in this last season 65 catches, 965 yards, 4 touchdowns. When we got to the combine, or excuse me, even backtrack before that, when we got to the Senior Bowl, I think that's where he put everyone on notice, like, oh, this guy is a pretty fantastic player, working to get open, route running, doing a lot of the fun things. Then we fast forward to the NFL Combine, where he runs the 4.41, has the 42-inch vertical, 10.9 broad jump, the 6.6 4.3 cone, 4.05 shuttle, and all of a sudden, Ricky Pearsall is any and everybody's darling sleeper. Can't leave your draft without this guy. What do you say, Zach? Are you leaving many drafts with Ricky Pearsall?
I'll tell you, if you want to highlight scout, Pearsall is the guy. If you're like, put on some Ricky Pearsall tape, watch him make some catches. Like, I know everyone talked about Keon Coleman, but holy cow, does Ricky Pearsall have some plays? Even without playing it down in the Reese's Senior Bowl, Ricky Pearsall raised his draft stock further than maybe anyone in this year's pre-draft process. His highlights in the one-on-one drills were plastered all over Twitter, underscored by glowing reports from scouts and fantasy football hacks that are all scrambling to be the loudest and the firstest. Fist fights broke out over who is the biggest Pearsall zealot. Thousands of computers in hundreds of mothers' basements. Quickness, though, is the buzzword, especially when it comes to wide receivers working underneath, and Pearsall is quick. He's quick with the ball. He's often used on screens, slants, outs, but his quickness is often more straight line than lateral. When he attacks man coverage, Pearsall is most successful stringing together double moves. And man, he has some that they're absolute teach tape. I know I said that to you in a DM, JMic, when I was watching him, but he will put some double moves on film. He sells out and ups or slant and go routes expertly. Corners instinctively bite on his initial cut like a bass. They're just unable to resist that banjo minnow. Pearsall is at his best, though, attacking zone coverages. He routinely waits for the precise moment that he gets past the first-level defender, and then he'll cut right off the back of that defender's head into the tract of space between levels of a zone. Really savvy, not something that you see very often with college-level receivers, but fun to watch.
I love that this idea of lurking in the shadows, and I feel like he did so much of that as we watch his tape, being able to get into, navigate, and manipulate blind spots of the defenders in the secondary, whether it be in man or whether it be in zone. Ricky Pearsall's quickness, I think, cannot be overstated. And the way that he's able to weaponize it on a consistent basis allows him to have the success that he's able to have, where he can run wide open in many instances and the ball's not even coming his way. I don't know how many times, Zach, where I would watch him be put in motion. Do you know the motion man, the motion man, the motion man? With Ricky Pearsall going in motion, or even when he's just lined up and working, him doing any and everything that he can to just find space, find an opening, be a light in an otherwise really dim. That's not fair. Travis Etienne, Trevor Etienne, the running back who was there in Florida. I think he was someone who was also a light in that offense, but for him to not get the ball more, I was getting really upset watching the film because again, I really like what he is able to do within his routes, and I do think that from a technician standpoint, just someone who is consistently working. As you said, the double moves I think are most fun to watch, and I think for me, the consistency with what he's able to do with his footwork, short and intermediate, and really put defenders on their heels is something that plays in any offense, any style, that allows him to be able to get on the field, I think, sooner rather than later, and be someone that we can be excited about for year one. Maybe not in the top end of things, but someone that says, I don't need seasoning. I don't need to be sitting behind someone. I'm ready to be plugged in now, and I really like that about Pearsall's game. Again, a guy who spent 3 years at Arizona State, Zack, and now 2 years at Florida, and is just now coming out. Why is it that we're just now seeing the likes of Pretty Ricky coming to the NFL level?
Well, whether it is because he needs to be schemed open at the line of scrimmage, which I don't necessarily believe, or his offensive coordinator just got bored, is always asking Ricky Pearsall to determine whether they're facing man or zone. He's always in motion. Just an incredible amount of snaps where Pearsall is moving before the ball is snapped. It's interesting to note, though, that he is borderline awful at selling play action fakes on end arounds and jet sweeps, which is hilarious because he's put in motion and in that position so often, but he's not ever going to win an Emmy. Even with all of the pre-snap movement, I still think he's pretty susceptible to contact. He gets pushed off route, occasionally even giving up on routes. Pearsall will look like an all-pro in one play, working a double move or a slant to perfection. And on the next play, he seems like he can't be bothered to run full speed. It's a small thing, but that inconsistency, especially against man coverage, is a little bit troubling. I think the counting stats and even a fair portion of Pearsall's film are a little bit underwhelming, but his ability to routinely succeed against zone coverages and have the speed and quickness to beat man coverage will probably earn him day two capital and a chance to prove himself early on. Pearsall will need to fine-tune some of those flaws, but there is a path for him to be fantasy relevant in the future, even if it probably is at a wide receiver 2 level. There's some meat on the bone for Ricky Pearsall.
You highlight the one thing that I have to make sure that I bring up in reference to weaknesses for him, and it's not even so much right at the line of scrimmage. It tends to be within route and oftentimes at the stem of his route, even with all of his quickness. When he's not working and lurking in those shadows, as we mentioned previously, when defenders get their hands on him, they make him pay. And again, 6'1", 189. I don't know if it's just generally speaking a lack of play strength or strength on the move, because again, we're looking at a guy who's really explosive testing wise. And even after he's gotten the ball in his hand, you see the likes of, okay, here's someone who sees the field, who's working to try to get more, but I don't even necessarily see that play strength come out when he's running the ball either. And so I just have, I'm nervous when it comes to if we see you get bullied at times at the stem of your route, and we see you sometimes get bullied when you get the ball in your hand, where do you give us the extra goodness with all the skills that you do have before you even have the ball in your hand? Ricky Pearsall is a player that I think that the explosiveness from on a route to route basis, while it varies, what we see consistently is that quickness allows him to win. I think it's I don't necessarily want to say like a souped up version of Jacob Cowing, but I think that he is the 6'1" version of what you'd hope Jacob Cowing was or is. And I think that his suddenness and quickness are going to allow for really positive things at the next level. So yeah, I'm excited about Ricky Pearsall. All right, Zach, 6 more down.
Woo.
We did it. All right, so at this point, that is 18 wide receivers that we've scouted to this point, Zach.
Yeah, and
legitimately, y'all, I'm not. This is not hyperbole when I say this. We've probably got about 10 more to go at a minimum that we'd like to be able to get in on this catch-all here in the coming weeks. So more wide receivers to come. There's a lot of goodness that still in store. Again, let me not put the cart before the horse, Zach. We got to get to these film grades when we think about this group of wide receivers and also how they play into the landscape of the other 12 guys that we've scouted in the previous weeks. Again, our first catch-all is exciting. We get to see more of the board be revealed, and there's still so much to come in reference to the actual NFL draft and where folks land. But Zach, let's talk through, again, film grades when we think through these players and how they stack up with the 18 that we've watched in total.
It's always kind of fun to be surprised in a catch-all episode where somebody like Ricky Pearsall pops off enough to be in my top 7. I mean, he's 7 overall. He's gonna head this group of 6. For me, it's Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, Cowing, Ja'Lynn Polk, Jalen McMillan, and Brenden Rice bringing up the rear. If we're talking overall, out of the players that we've watched and talked about, Marvin Harrison Jr. up at the top, Malik Neighbors up with him, and there's not that much to choose between the two of them. I think those two players are absolutely fantastic. My next tier is Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, and Rome Odunze. And again, not much to choose between them. And these aren't necessarily how you have to draft players. And that's, I think, really important when you're talking to somebody giving you rankings, is how they're seeing their rankings, as opposed to whether they're giving you, this is how you should draft these players, or this is what I see, but also take into account ADP. Because I think Odunze, there's not even a question, Odunze will go ahead of Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas in almost every rookie draft that happens. I think that talent-wise, it's a lot closer than people think, and this is a very talented class. Below that tier, I've got a tier of Tez Walker, Ricky Pearsall, Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin, Malachi Corley, and then below that, I've got Xavier Legette, Jacob Cowing, Ja'Lynn Polk. And then if you want to keep going, there's another tier. I've got Keon Coleman, Roman Wilson, Adonai Mitchell, Jalen McMillan, and Brenden Rice down there. So it's a really deep class. There are a lot of players that I'm interested in. Normally, when we talk about a class, there may be one wide receiver that I am madly in love with. There may be 3 that I think, I'm willing to draft and go out of my way a little bit to take shots on. This class, man, there are 2 top tier. There are 3 more guys that I really like. And then there's a group of 5 that I'm interested in pieces of their game. So this is a really deep wide receiver class.
Deep indeed. And when we're thinking through and looking at the players from tonight. Ricky Pearsall headlines the group for me as well, Zach. From there, we have Xavier Legette. We have Jacob Cowing. I have Polk and McMillan graded, graded a half point from each other. And I was really surprised at how much I like Rome Odunze and how not much I liked either of the Jalen's out of Washington, especially for all of the production that they produced this over the last 2 seasons. It was kind of strange for me, but it is what it is. And then Brenden Rice, who I think really had some fun flashes for me on film, just being able to, okay, I think I see what you're trying to accomplish. Just not be someone that consistently stood out, I feel like, or made the most of it. That's how I have those 6. And again, from also, Zach, I forgot to tell you, I got the an interesting message one day of someone requesting, hey, JMic, I think you need to go back and watch Roman Wilson. I think you need to do a rewatch because I don't think that you were very glowing in terms of the things that he actually does well. I said, you know what? I will humble myself. I will work my tail off to find time before we end this to rewatch Roman Wilson so that I can try to be more fair, judicious about how I watch. So I said, you know what? I'll do that.
Was that Harbaugh sliding into your DMs?
I won't say that he offered me a fresh pair of khakis with cuffs and a crease. I won't say that. I'll just say that someone asked that. Similar to you again from when we're thinking through film grades, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, for those that may be new to the program, I had them separated by half a point. I really, to be fair, I love Neighbors. He's probably my favorite watch of all positions in this class of all players. I have Rome Odunze in the tier down from those 2. And then I think the next tier down for me is grade-wise, Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy. Then I have Troy Franklin and Lab McConkey, who are kind of in their own tier. And then from there, and I told you earlier, Zach, I have Ricky Pearsall, Adonai Mitchell, Tez Walker. When I actually went and sorted it, I didn't recognize they all have the same grade. I'm sorry, I lied. 57.5 for Ricky, 57.5 for Mitchell, and then 55.5 for Walker. But those guys are all right there together. And then when it gets further down, I've already talked through it in terms of Legette, Polk, and I've got Keon Coleman around there with Polk and McMillan, and it's yeah. But that is what it is. But if you're waiting for us to be able to talk some Malik Washington, we're gonna get there. Some Jermaine Burton, we're gonna get there. Javon Baker, you want us to talk through the likes of Hayden Hatton, we're gonna get there. Ryan Flournoy, Johnny Wilson, Jaquan Jackson, we're gonna get there. There's a lot obviously being done. There's a lot of time we're working through these players, but we have heard your call, we have heard your cry, and we are going to get to these players that you all have wanted us to be able to talk through. We're going to get there. I know Zack was talking about finishing up his work on Jamari Thrash out of Louisville. I don't know why we're wasting all this time with all of these Louisville players. I don't get it. It's gross. But we do this because we care about obviously spending time with each other. We care about this craft, and we care about taking care of you, our listeners, our supporters. Thank you very much for rocking with us. Again, from our day ones to the folks who have just come along for the ride, even in this season, or just finding out about us through Fantasy Cares. Thank you. You could spend an hour listening to anybody or an hour doing anything in your week. It's like you're the math guy, Zach. What do we have? How many hours in a week? 180 something hours in a week.
I don't know. I spend them all at work or watching film. So there are a lot, I know.
So you could be doing anything, but to be able to listen to us talk about these 6 players and what we've done over the last month plus, we're grateful. Thank you. We appreciate you. Zach, Again, 3 shows left prior to the NFL draft. Anything else that we need to make sure that we're preparing our hearts and our minds and our souls for before we get there?
No, I think it's just really humbling for me, and I think probably both of us, that people take the time, spend time with us, listen to us. And again, the my film notes, if you're interested at all, fantasycares.org/dynasty dummies. None of that money goes to me. It's all going to charity. So, donate often, donate early, and go get those film notes if you want. And I mean, this is so much fun for both of us to be able to watch these players, talk the kind of where we see things shaking out, to be able to get you in a position where you're not taken by surprise when the draft happens. You've already got a little bit of a background, a little bit of a foothold, or it's giving you a little bit of a starting point to go watch your own. I know I have DMs with people who are totally disagreeing with me, but using our rankings or our evaluations as kind of a foothold to jump off. And like, that's what it's all about. Like, you don't have to agree with us, but we appreciate you being here and we appreciate you interacting. I always love it. And it's the Hootenanny is one of my favorite times of the year, and it's because of everybody listening, everybody watching, everybody joining us in the chat. So we appreciate you listening. We appreciate you sticking around for the catch-all. We're coming back with another one next week. I'm not sure yet who we're watching, but we're going to watch somebody. We'll have 6 more for you next week. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you joining us. I am at Tacit Assassin 13 on Twitter. JMic is at JMic Check. The show is at Dynasty Dummies. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. Thank you for listening. Peace.
Tyrone Tracy, Will Shipley, Isaiah Davis. So many running back still, Zach. I could keep it going. I could keep it going.
Did you say Dylan Lobby yet?
Dylan
Where's
Lobby?
Where's the button? We got to get out of here.
Find the button. Get us out of here.